Right, 130 participants and climbing. Davide, floor is yours.
Thank you, Philippe. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and good morning and good evening also to all colleagues joining from other continents. And welcome to this third webinar about SATCOM for aviation that is today focused on SATCOM maturity and development. This webinar is organized by ESA, Eurocontrol, SESAR JU, and SESAR Deployment Manager. My name is Davide Corinaldesi, and I am the DLS Program Manager working in SESAR Deployment Manager. And today, I am honored to moderate this event. But now it is time to remind you the context of this webinar. Considering the need to improve financial and operational efficiency of ATM, including, of course, green benefits, a huge interest on ATM digitalization is arising in the aviation community. We know that its implementation requires to be supported by CNS innovation, and in this context, of course, the DLS Datalink services is recognized as one of the communication pillars. We know that DLS is composed by three elements: application services, for example, ATM B1 and ATS B2, protocols like ATN OSI in Europe, implemented in Europe, and ATN IPS, and of course, technologies, for example, VDMO2. The technologies and protocols play a relevant role in the sustainability and also in the innovation of the current Datalink system, allowing to maintain and improve the performances, to implement new application services, and also to reach the global interoperability that is very, very relevant. Then among the new terrestrial and space-based technologies, of course, SATCOM is very relevant because currently questions related to its short, medium, and long-term deployment are popping up in the ATM community. It is also to be noted that SATCOM is only one of the future deployment among the other technologies. And a series of awareness webinars on this topic have been organized to support any potential decision on its implementation. Then today, the focus will be almost on the IRIS system because we can consider it as one of the more mature technologies systems that are in the moment available. The summary of the previous modules. As said before, this is the third of a series of webinar on this topic. The overall context: we are following the previous webinars organized on aviation communication technologies. We had, for example, 3 webinars about LDACs. These webinars are focusing now on SATCOM technologies that are already largely used by aviation to support CNS, of course, safety-related services. The first webinar was organized in January of this year. It was SATCOM for aviation, the stakeholders' perspective, and it was a general introduction to aviation satellite services, including R&D activities. Then the second one was organized in February. The title was IRIS SATCOM, a system designed for aviation, and it was an overview of the IRIS system, its motivations and benefits, with the point of view of the avionics manufacturers. And then we are in the third webinar today. The title is, as I said before, SATCOM Maturity and Deployment, and it is an overview of the technology maturity, pre-commercial flights, airlines perspective, and also certification aspects. The panel members that we will have today are Benoit Joran and Sylvie Sureda Perez from Inmarsat, Armin Schlereff from DFS, Andrew Egan and Kieran Murphy from EasyJet, and finally, Ivan Ferenc from EASA. As said before, I am Davide Corinaldesi from SESAR Deployment Manager, and I will act as a moderator. Going in the details of the agenda, after this introduction, we will have a presentation about IRIS from pre-commercial flights to deployment. Then we will have the NSPS operational perspective, the airlines operational perspective, safety and certification aspects, and finally, the Q&A session where we would like to answer to your questions. Finally, some practical information at the end of the first presentation, the third and the last presentation, 3 pools will be published, and you will be invited to fill them. Of course, then we will show the results and we will comment the outcomes. Furthermore, if you have questions, please write them in the chat, and during the question and answer session, we will be more than happy to answer you. Of course, if time will not permit to answer to all questions, we will provide you the answer by email in the next days. So that's all for now, and I think it is time to start with the first presentation. It comes from Inmarsat. The title, as said before, is IRIS from pre-commercial flights to deployment. The presenters are Benoit Juran and Sylvie Schroeder-Perez. Benoit has been working in Inmarsat as an IRIS project manager for the last 3 years, while Sylvie leads the IRIS activities for the aviation business unit since 2016. In particular, the alignment between the program and the strategy and business perspectives. Before joining Inmarsat, she has been working in air traffic management and aviation for more than 20 years. So there, Benoit, please take the screen control, sharing your slides, and then the floor is yours. Please, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Davide. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I just have a message saying I cannot share my screen until you are until other participants are sharing. So I guess you need to stop sharing. Yeah.
Yes, just stop. I think you can share now.
We are. Oops, sorry. Here we are. Can you see my screen? Okay.
Perfect. Please go ahead.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So my presentation is really focusing on system maturity and deployment. And this is going to be followed by Sylvie, who will be focusing on the business perspective. Okay. So to start with, I've got here a kind of reminder of the IRIS architecture, which was presented at the last webinar. So you can see that really the IRIS system when is using the existing satellite constellation from Inmarsat, and especially the Inmarsat 4 satellite, which will be complemented soon by the Inmarsat 6. The ground station here and the satellite access station are common to all Inmarsat services, so there is no change here. And the core really of the IRIS system is this IRIS ground gateway here that we have developed specifically for IRIS, and which is called the AeroRack. And this IRIS ground gateway is talking to new terminals, which have been developed recently as well from Cobham and Honeywell. So we've got Aspire 400 from Honeywell and the Aviator 200S from Cobham, which is also called Light Cockpit SATCOM from by Airbus. So the ground gateway and these terminals are made to really communicate and set up, communicate together and set up a secured link through the satellite network. So we've got basically a secured VPN, which is created from the ground gateway here up to the cockpit of the aircraft. And this allows to safely then transfer any data we want to through this VPN. So the services we want to provide with this system, you can see them here. The plain line here is already operational, and that's already in service. So you've got the ACARS for fans and AOC application. We've got the voice services, and then we've got the airline IP. You can see here the airline IP is not going through the VPN; it's going directly to the aircraft without going through this VPN. So that's what's been implemented and in service at the moment. And the next steps really for ARIS is to extend these services to the ATN over OSI. And that's something which is going to go through that, but which is really expected to start operationally in 2023. And we are also working on the future really, which is going to be ATN over IPS. That's something we are at the moment we have implemented at let's say prototype level. Okay. So if I move on, in summary, we've got like 3 main steps in the ARIS deployment or ARIS development. The first step is really the integration, the implementation of the security infrastructure, which is creating this secured VPN between the air and the ground. So this second step is the ATN over OSI layer, and third step will be the ATN IPS layer. So this first step here, as I said, so we're covering ACARS for fans 1A, ACARS for AOC, and then SAT voice to the cockpit, and then we've got IP connection to the airline information service domain in the aircraft. This first step of deployment is fully implemented and validated. Okay, and we have started the operation in November last year. So that's very recent, but it's already in operation with a number of commercial aircraft flying on a daily basis using this SATCOM system. This is a service we call SB Safety 2.0 or Swift Broadband Safety 2.0. The next step is the implementation of the ATN OSI layer. So here we want to add really the ATN messages to allow CPDLC and ADSC messages in Europe mainly. And this is implemented in a multi-link environment. So with the VDL Mode 2 network. So the aircraft will be configured either with a SATCOM preferred or VDL preferred. But in case the preferred link is down, then the switch system will switch automatically to the backup link. So this development is we've got the infrastructure fully implemented, and that's been flight tested already. What we are at the moment is really working on the final validation campaign to support the certification, both on the terminal side, on the SATCOM side, yes, and also on the ground side, where we want to have a ground ATS organization approval for the ARIS service provider. Okay, so this approval for the ARIS service provider is expected in Q1 23, and we're expecting a terminal certification from Airbus around Q4 this year. Okay, which means we're going to start commercial flights in Q1 23 with EasyJet, where we want to start a demonstration, like large-scale demonstration with commercial aircraft. So I'll come back to that. The third step is IPS. So here, again, we want to focus on ATN V3 and ATN V3 in the future. Where we are at the moment is really prototyping activities. So we have an early prototype which has been flight tested last week with the Boeing Echo Demonstrator. Not last week, sorry, last year last summer in I think June. And we are now currently working on a more mature prototype which will support the SESAR validation exercise. So which is expected in Q3 22 this year, and we've got also further plan to further develop this prototype, and we expect a new prototype available by within 23 with further functionalities. So the goal of all these IPS prototypes really is a demonstration purposes and also to support all the standardization activities. So that's let's say a validation exercise. If I focus a bit more on AT and OSI in terms of system validation, so we've got 4 main levels of validation. The first one is a test campaign which is performed at aircraft avionic level, so mainly on the SATCOM terminal and the CMU. So this test campaign is really focusing on getting the certification from EASA for airworthiness of the avionic. This is also a big part of the testing is also addressing the Inmarsat type approval, which is demonstrating really the interoperability with the Inmarsat network. And we've got also a test campaign covering SESAR and Collins interoperability. So this is mainly done by lab testing and flight testing. And I'm going to go back a bit more in detail later on where we are with that. Regarding the Inmarsat ground infrastructure, so here again, we are having a very detailed test campaign to validate all functionalities and demonstrate the compliance to the different requirements of the system in order to allow for the ARIS service provider to get this AOA approval from EASA. So here we're performing mainly lab testing using real hardware and over-the-air testing, which means we've got in our lab terminals which are connected to the ground through satellites. And we've got 2 main campaigns, which are one is really focused on the security infrastructure, and this campaign is now closed. And the one we are focusing at the moment is all requirements related to AT and OSI, and especially Multilink. We will also have end-to-end validation, so which aims at validating the interface from the ground with the ground ATN network and the ANSPs. And this is performed implicitly through the different test campaign, because when we test the Inmarsat ground infrastructure and the aircraft avionic, we need the support from the ANSPs and the support from the test system. So we are testing the end system through this test campaign as well. And the last step will be the ARIS demonstration, which is a long-term performance monitoring with commercial aircraft, where here the aim will be to use the system in operational condition and then demonstrate the long-term performances of the system. So in summary here, all system functionalities have been verified, including Multilink with VDL, and we are now focusing really on the final test campaign to support the certification. And this is expected to finish by end of May for Inmarsat and Airbus. This slide here gives a bit more visibility on the flight test campaign performed by Honeywell. So you can see here 2 flight test campaigns have been performed in the US last year and 1 in Europe. So it's about 40 flight hours in total. And you can see that the aircraft was connected both from SATCOM and from VDL to then the SESAR ATN network. And this was then connected to different test end system, either through Eurocontrol or even SETA has been supporting this testing. So all intended functionalities have been successfully tested in flight, okay, and including the Multilink. The next step here for Honeywell is now to move from this let's say very mature prototype, which was testing during this test campaign, into a certified product. And so the ATN OSI features certification is will be added to the Aspire 400 by end of 22 in terms, yeah. And regarding the CMU, I think we're expecting yes, ATN OSI over SBS safety capability to be available by end of 23. Regarding Airbus, so development status, Airbus is now performing the last really or the final test campaign the test campaign with the final avionic version, which is a candidate for certification. So as I said, this is expected to finish by end of May, the test campaign, and then the certification dossier will be provided to the authority, and we're expecting a certification in Q4 this year. In terms of, I've put here this slide here, which give an illustration of the next flight test we're expecting from Airbus. So you can see here, this is planned to be this Wednesday, so this week on the 30th of March. So the aircraft will fly from Toulouse to Edinburgh in Scotland, where they will be connected to a test center, so the Airbus test center and maybe Eurocontrol as well, to perform different testing like multi-link or any test they need to perform. And then from Edinburgh down to Toulouse, they're going to fly with operational CPDLC over SATCOM. So it's operational ATN B1 and B2. So it's going to be CPDLC plus ADSC over SATCOM through NATS, MUAC, DFS, SkyGuide, and then back to Toulouse. I think the last part over France will be connected to the test center. But I just want to highlight this slide because that's a first really for IRIS. It will be the first time that we've got operational CPDLC, ADSC with real air traffic test center. Air traffic center. So we've got support for that from NATS, MUAC, DFS, and SkyGuide. CETA has been supporting us as well in setting up this flight test. I want to thank all of them here for their support. Next step, will be the IRIS demonstration flight with commercial aircraft. So as I said, the objective here is really to demonstrate the performances and benefits of the service over several months. I think it was going roughly 6 months on commercial aircraft. So EasyJet have been working with us, and we have recently signed a contract with EasyJet to equip a number of aircraft with SATCOM. So we're expecting around 10 aircraft to be available between end of this year and Q4 next year. And we are also in discussion with other airlines, which might increase the number of aircraft during this demonstration. And we have on the other side, we've got a number of NSPs supporting this demonstration. So we currently have 13 NSPs involved in IRIS project. 8 have confirmed that they're going to participate to this demonstration. And definitely here, I think we need more. So we are working really to get more NSP on board. And if any are attending today and wish to participate, do not hesitate to contact us to increase the coverage of this demonstration. This is a roadmap to summarize what I've said. So in terms of, if I look at the top here, the IRIS service provider, so we had a kickoff between EASA and the IRIS service provider, which is ESSP, in February this year. The expectation is to obtain a first certificate from EASA by end of this year, so we can start the IRIS demonstration flights with EasyJet. And we will then have let's say a full or a complete certificate mid next year once we've got the long-term performances of the system available. In terms of Airbus timeline, so you've got here like the different flight tests performed. So we had the first flight test in July. We had a larger campaign performed in November last year. We've got a new campaign in March, let's say starting next week. So it's will be early April here. And as I said, we're expecting the fancy over SATCOM to be certified by November, which would then lead to installation on the jet aircraft, and then start of the demonstration from early 23. On ONOL side, as I said also, so we had a flight test, same thing, I think in June, first test campaign. We had more in August and November. Aspire 400 with ITNOSI certification is expected end of this year, and then the CMU rather end of next year. Okay, one last slide with AT and IPS development. So yes, the first point is, like I said already, like the Boeing Echo Demonstrator 2021, we have participated to this demonstration with let's say an early prototype, but which was provided by COBAM and Inmarsat. But yeah, we managed to do some successful flight tests in July 21, so that was a good step. And then we are now working on a further more detailed prototype, more mature prototype to support the SESAR solution 77 and 107. So we're working with Honeywell on the SATCOM side, Frequency, CGI, and Inmarsat to work on the ground side. And the goal really is to be part of the SESAR demonstration in August 22. That's going to be lab testing with over satellite network, so lab testing over the air. And finally, yes, we're working on a further prototype development with expected flight tests are under discussion or under negotiation for end of 23. So that's a project which is going to be funded by ESA again. And yes, not signed yet, but we are almost there. Okay. So that's all for me. Sylvie, do you want to take over and go through the business perspective?
Yeah, thank you very much. If you can, yes, thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. I will focus on deployment from the business perspective. So as you can see from Benoit's presentation, the technology challenges are behind us. So there are the challenges now are how can we deploy the technology, because basically what we are saying is that the technology is ready, the deployment is ready. There are some steps that still need to be done as a certification of the IRIS service provider. And the avionics is mostly certified because both the SATCOM products are commercial products from Honeywell and COBAM. The remaining certification activities are rather to concentrating on the ATA and OSI layer, which is a small layer added to the terminal itself, but the terminal itself is already a commercial product. So in terms of benefits of deploying IRIS, it's really anticipating the upcoming, well, the expected, let's say, VDL Mode 2 degradation. It's pretty agreed in the community that there is a need to complement the VDL Mode 2 network, because in terms of capacity and performance, it will not be able to support alone the communication requirements, in particular considering the needs for future applications, both for ATM, but also for connected cockpit for AOC services for airlines. So there's a possibility with this maturity in terms of technology to start a gradual deployment by 2023, which is when the service is planned to be ready and certified using the natural fleet renewal process. In terms of deployment, there's also a very immediate benefit that is coming from the design of the SATCOM, which is covering basically not only the European zone entirely, but much more than Europe. So you can implement immediately a pan-European service for airspace users, with benefits, as I mentioned, for airlines operation and also to support the ATM modernization. As the SATCOM technology has been used successfully for more than 20 years in the oceanic region, and IRIS is simply an additional application that is running on this commercially available service that we already provide, the risk in terms of technical operation of it's not an entirely new service. So the technical gap or the operational gap is very small. So it means that there are very limited operational risk or any risk to airlines and ANSP to use the service. Also, as you know, it's already a global standard available and a global solution. There's no ground deployment, as explained by Benoit, so it's very low complexity in terms of, again, technical and operational risk to use the service. And as the certification process has already started, with an initial multi-link concept that will be demonstrated during this certification. Again, it's a mitigation for any operational or technical risk for the airspace users and the ANSPs. The global service is there. On one terminal, all the services will be available, fans, ACARS, ATN, IP, and the future ones for ATN, OSI, and IPS. And there are already plans to enlarge the service coverage area to adjacent and new regions. Last but not least, there are also some activities within Inmarsat and within the ESA IRIS program to extend the use beyond commercial air transport to other users like air passes, and we have already been demonstrating with Altitude Angel some UTM services. Next one, please. In terms of benefits of IRIS, so it's always very difficult to run a cost-benefit analysis of a technology enabler, but we have done that within the IRIS project. We have also contributed to the Eurocontrol FC Future Communication Infrastructure business case. So this is a summary, a very high-level summary of how we estimated the benefits of using IRIS, in particular for airspace users. So what you see on the slide are the categories of benefits that we have been considering. Starting from the left, so of course mitigating the VDL Mod2 shortcomings. So this is the rationale of allocating the benefits to the technology. We're reusing the Link 2000 plus results that simulated or estimated that Datalink services in general will improve the airspace capacity by around 10%. And what we have been considering in this cost-benefit analysis is that some of this overall benefits of Datalink will be allocated to IRIS based on the percentage of aircraft that will be using the technology gradually between 2023 to 2038. We have also considered the specific benefits of new services for airlines operational communications, in particular using the IP pipe over IRIS. The second set of benefits is enabling the CP1 benefits. So obviously, as Davide mentioned, the communication enabler is essential to innovate, for innovation and for providing better quality of service, and in particular to implement some of the ATM functionalities that are the baseline for the CP1 mandate. In particular, as you know, EPP, but some others. What we considered is that a share of the CP1 estimated benefits cannot materialize without a resilient Datalink infrastructure. And same as for the previous benefits, we allocated a share of the benefits to IRIS, and we considered that between 5 to 10% of the total CP1 benefits over the period could be allocated to IRIS. What you see on the bottom, on the gray box, is the deployment scenario that we considered for those two benefits scenarios. Basically, around 4,000 aircraft equipped with IRIS by 2038, using only line fit program. for accumulated investment for airlines of 155 million, that these are discounted figures, and accumulated OPEX for ANSPs of around 135 million, discounted also. So that's the total for the period. The last set of benefits, and it's complementary. It's rather the longer term vision that is enabling the master plan beyond CP1, based again on the estimation of benefits that were done within the master plan. NM simulations considered basically that 4.5 minutes of delay per flight could be avoided, or could happen in case the ATM is not improved significantly, and that unlocking ATM master plan benefits relies on increased machine-to-machine dialogue, which means basically data link services that have more capabilities than the one now. So again, requiring a multi-link datacom infrastructure in place, and IRIS is part of it. For this one, we have considered that there will be also another data link on top of VDL-MO2 and IRIS, probably LDAX, as we discussed that during the with Eurocontrol FCI business case. And for this scenario, we considered that 30% of the total ATM master plans benefits could be allocated to DLS, to data link services, because they would be at risk if no efficient data link services are deployed to enable the master plan applications. And we allocated only 50% of those benefits to IRIS, because there will be other technologies, data link technologies. For this scenario, we considered that much more aircraft will be equipped, because in the master plan, the assumption is that 90% of the fleet are equipped for the master plan applications. It's not specific to communication or navigation surveillance, it's overall. So we applied the same assumptions to communication, which give this figure of 10,000 aircraft equipped with IRIS and LDAX and VDL-MO2 by 2038. Of course, the investment by airlines is more significant, because this is a significant number of aircraft. And on the contrary, the OPEX for ANSP for IRIS remains the same. We can go to the next one, please. And this is a wrap-up and also a conclusion of this presentation. So IRIS that is out there for ANSPs and airspace users. Again, it's ready for deployment. The technology is ready. The deployment is already starting with the certification activity, with also the pre-commercial commercial flights that will be performed in 2022 by EasyJet, but probably with additional airlines. There are operational and cost saving at hand that really justify the investment by airlines. So this is a few of the figures that extracted from the IRIS cost-benefit analysis. So today, there are already some benefits from using data link services because of this improvement of the capacity that may be lost if no efficient data link, or if the VDL-MO2 quality of service is not there anymore. In average, 115 million per year of benefits for the airspace users. Basically fuel savings and capacity, so reduced delays, but also coming from the improved AOC air services that could use the IP pipe. And for the future, we considered that around 3 billion of benefits are potentially at risk without the future communication infrastructure, and this is coming from the ATM master plan, the rationale I explained just before. And those are the benefits that can be allocated to IRIS. So it's a very significant figure. In terms of deployment, so it can be sustainable, not only because of these monetary benefits that can be accrued for airlines, but also because the airline investment is not made for the European ATC services. As we already mentioned, the service will be global as soon as the ATN IPS in particular is adopted in other regions. There's a very sustainable opportunity to install the capability on the aircraft using the natural fleet renewal process. So basically, by 2023, the airlines that are interested by the technology can ask already to the aircraft manufacturer to install the device on their aircraft line fit, which is obviously a very sustainable option for the airlines. And the pan-European services will allow a cost-sharing mechanisms between ANSPs to the benefit of all the stakeholders. Of course, it means that there are some challenges to implement this pan-European deployment, and that there is a need for a decision on how to coordinate an air-and-ground deployment to really trigger the airspace users' investment, because they need to have the confidence that the service will be available once, as soon as they have equipped their aircraft. And probably incentives for early users would help triggering deployment. But overall, this is really an opportunity at hand for the airspace users and improving air traffic management, including from the perspective of CO2 emission savings, because as everyone knows this figure, that ATM improvement is supposed to bring 5 to 10% of CO2 emission savings. And that ends my presentation.
So thank you very much, Benoit, Sylvie, for your clear and interesting presentation. I think that we are receiving questions about it. If it is the case, of course, we will address the answers during the question and answer session. Now I think it's time to share with you the first poll. So Philippe, if you can share the poll. I would like to ask to the colleagues to fill it, giving them some seconds. I don't see the poll, not yet. So Philippe, are you sharing? Yes, thank you, I see. So it's about motivation for SATCOMs, SATCOM communication. Of course, the participation to these polls are completely in an anonymous way, just for statistical purposes. Okay, I think we can show the results. And here we have the results. So for the question was, for your organization, what is the biggest motivation to use SATCOM-based Datalink? And then it seems that the performance, so considering the coverage, data rate, and the capacity that would be available, of course, if compared to what we have today, is the most chosen. Then we have the improvement of safety-related services, and the upgrade that complement all technologies. So we are speaking in this case, for example, VDM02. And finally, we have, it is one key enabler for I4D and the related benefits, together with technology maturity and reliability. And finally, we have the support, the deployment and scalability of non-ATS. Interesting feedback. Personally speaking, it was expected by me. I don't know if you would like to comment them, Benoit, Sylvie, or the other presenters, please.
I think it's interesting to note that the focus of benefits are rather on the, I would say, performance and ATC side than AOC side. So there's probably some work to do on how we can further consolidate the benefits for the AOC part. And we really welcome any inputs and contribution from the airlines on that activity.
Yeah, I fully agree with you, Sylvie. For me, the performance is one of the key drivers for sure, because we are considering here the possibility to have more capacity. Then also the speed of the new technologies will be interesting, so the data rate, and finally also the coverage, because it's clear one of the advantage of the SATCOM systems is to have a large coverage, including low levels, for sure. So it would permit in the future to introduce other services in an easy way, for sure. So I don't know if you have other comments from the presenters. If not, I think we can proceed. We can proceed with the next presentation. So thank you very much for answering to this poll. Now it's time to start with the second presentation. The title is the NSPS Operational Perspectives. It comes from DFS. The presentation has been done in cooperation with NATS and MUAC. And I have the pleasure to introduce Armin Schleret. Armin started working at DFS in 1994. During his career, he was involved in Datalink matters since the beginning, working on BDL standardization and UAT and Aeromax account standardization also. He led the DFS project for ATN OSI implementation as part of the European Link 2000 Plus infrastructure, and today he is the responsible for the product management. Besides this, DFS work in DFS. He's also the chair of Eurocai Working Group 82 since 2010, where SATCOM MASPs and MOPs have been deployed and published. So, dear Armin, please take the screen, share your slides, and then the floor is yours. I think you have to unmute your mic, Armin.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect. Please go ahead.
So thank you for the introduction, Davide, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to say a little bit more about the ANSP's perspective on SATCOM for aviation. Good morning and good afternoon to all listeners. What I would like to show you now are a few slides. I hope now you can see the presentation mode.
Yes, that's perfect, Armin. Thank you.
Okay. So with respect to Datalink, we already got this interesting result from the pool that the major point which is expected is to get more performance. And I think this is a major element of the SATCOM implementation in our view, because for all future concepts I know about since the last decades, of course, we need Datalink as an enabler, but even for new applications, we need a wideband air-ground data link for ATS. Currently, we have the VDL Mode 2 now implemented according to the implementing rules since 2013. And I have to say, it becomes more and more a stable solution for us and is well accepted by our controllers to be used for the CBDLC baseline 1 services. But we have to consider that in the future, we will face more data-hungry applications for sure, like EPP as part of the ATS baseline 2, the downlink of the trajectory information, and even in the future, trajectory negotiation, which will increase the data traffic a lot, I guess. Regarding VDL Mode 2, we are quite happy with the improvement of the performance, but it is considered as an intermediate solution on the way to get a wideband technology implemented. This is not only because of the bandwidth. When we are talking about for VDL Mode 2, we are talking about several kilobits per second of throughput. It's also with respect to the saturation we're expecting for VDL Mode 2. There were several studies conducted taking a look at the capacity required, also with respect to AOC capacity required for new aircrafts like the Airbus A320neo, which have 8 times the AOC traffic generation like the former ones. This might lead to a saturation in about 5 years from now. A typical year I always read in the different studies of 2027. And with this, we have to consider the possibility, at least for complementary purposes, to add new air-ground data links. For this, I put on my slide the 3 major candidates which we have considered in our working group 82 since 2010. Aeromax was the first one. It has been standardized and the standards are available and validated, but the implementation was not done, let's say, by the airspace users. So I don't know any implementation on the airborne side for Aeromax in order to make it available for ATS means in an airport area. We have LDAX. We have already an interesting webinar on the LDAX technology, which is a wideband system in the L-band, 500 kilohertz grid, and at least 50 times the throughput compared to VDL Mode 2. This is really a promising technology, but it requires further development and validation. I stated here standards are partly available by end of the year. This means for the ICAO development of the standards, we are on the same level of maturity like for SATCOM. So we expect end of the year the standards to be available for LDAX, but we have not yet started the work on the MOPS and the mass development, which is required for getting certified equipment on the avionics side. But there is already a kickoff meeting planned in April to get started with this in order to provide this material until mid of 2024. Regarding SATCOM, here, especially the IRIS system, we are well advanced with respect to this documentation. The space technology is already in place. The satellites are already running. The standards will be available by end of 2022. The MOPS and MASP are available and certification is ongoing. And we expect the validation complete by 2023, as also stated by Inmarsat by Benoit, just in the slide before. Just let's take a look at the current situation with respect to the implementation on the ground side. Okay, SATCOM is the most mature and operationally ready for ANSP's perspective from our side, and this makes it interesting. How can we use it already for our purposes for baseline 1? And this leads me to the next slide. I got this information most recent from Davide from SDM, so it shows you the situation from March 2022, just right now. So this is the European map, and you see the green parts are those airspaces where a baseline 1 is implemented on the ground. So we have, for the en route purposes for CBTLC, it's included. You can use this for air-ground communication. The red ones are not implemented, not provided, and parts of Portugal is partly provided. But as you can see, most of the area, we have equipment on the ground. And the question is, how can we use this for SATCOM? Is there any need to change any configuration, any implementation, any investment required? And I try to explain this, sorry, on my next slide. This is a very general scheme of an end-to-end ATN OSI data path. From the left side, it's our ACC, Air Control Center, with the controller working position with the FTPS. And we have a first interface to the Datalink environment, to the Datalink server. This is the interface. I just numbered it with a number 1. And behind that, we have an ATN ground router, ATN OSI ground router, establishing our routing domain. And with this, we have already our green part implemented. And this was shown just in the slide before on a regional area in Europe where you can find this implementation for the different centers. In order to make it run for an air-ground communication, of course, you need a connection to the communication service provider. Via interface 3, it can be done via NewPens or direct gateway interconnection, whatever. In our case for DFS, we have a NewPens interconnection to SETA in this in this case, where SETA as a CSP provides the ground-ground router and the air-ground router capability, and we have an interconnection, of course, also to ARINC, as we have to support also the second CSP as well. But it's a simplified scheme anyway. And then we have the VGSs on the interface 6 on the airborne side to get connected to the aircraft. We are running over multi-frequencies with VDLMO2, and this is shown that we need a multi-frequency control for that, and this is done by the CSP, so totally transparent for our purposes on the interface 3. In the future, it is planned, and there's currently, and David is in charge of this, to make a call for tender for a Datalink service provider, which should establish a common European ATN backbone, which the CAB stands for. This might be in the first step, the ground-ground router part, so from interface 3 to 4, but finally, it is intended to have it from 3 to 5 to have an air-ground part as well, as it has been developed in a study led by the STM until 2019, where I was involved. And the question is how to include here a SATCOM link. And a SATCOM link can easily be interconnected like shown here. What you see here is just to have the SATCOM service provider, which SSP stands for, with a ground-ground interconnection to the CAB, or in current case to the CSP. For our test purposes, it was hosted by SETA, and the air-ground capability. You should read this as the functionality in the SSP. So it's one system as far as I know. And this is part of the aero rack, which has been explained by Benoit just before. There are two aero racks in place. One is in Netherlands, in Burum, and another one at Hawaii, in Paumalu, in order to support this ATN OSI capability. And with this, you see that there is no change required with respect to the interface number 3. Everything happens just behind from the perspective of ANSP, and this makes it very attractive, and this leads also to a straightforward handling of some tests on our side, which I would like to tell you a little bit more about. So the major point which have to be confirmed here is that no changes on the ADNSP side is required in order to support SATCOM services over Inmarsat, so the IRIS system, with the plans with respect to the implementation as it is done right now. What has to be changed is, of course, a change routing scheme at the CSP side or the CAB side, but this is a configuration change only. With this, we decided to support tests here with equipage on aircraft as far as available, and also with lab testing in that context using our test environment. So the ANSP part here was our test environment located in Karlsruhe Center, partly. So the ACC part was the Karlsruhe Center, and between interface 1 and 3, it was our test environment in Langen for that purpose. And what we did, you can see it here. We did 2 tests in November last year. The first one was with the Honeywell test aircraft, which is shown here on the figure. It's an Embraer. Just to show you here the footprints of the coverage of the satellites of the Inmarsat system. We did it with an aircraft on the ground before it was transferred to with a flight to Europe to do the test campaign, which Benoit has just talked about it, in order to make end-to-end tests with our ANSP implementation on our controller working position. So actually the aircraft was at Duluth in USA, in Minnesota, on the ground, running over the American satellite, I guess via Paumalu, Hawaii, to the CSP located in Montreal, and to our units in Karlsruhe. So quite a distance, and but we have to say, after the first problems you usually have in order to set up the interconnections, it went very well. We didn't have any problems. We ran through all the tests, all the test messages. We did switch over tests, everything worked as expected, and we experienced a kind of delay on the order of 3 to 5 seconds, a turnaround delay, what we experienced in that time. We did the second test, so this was the Honeywell test setup, let's say in a real aircraft with a lab testing from Airbus in Toulouse. So we have to be careful with the pronunciation, Toulouse in France. And also running through the SESAR CSP in Montreal using SATCOM. And as similar as we experienced with Embraer, we didn't have any problems with respect to this. We run through all our message sets which were available on our controller working position, and everything went really smooth. With this, we are at the major immediate benefits in that context. So with the explanation I just pointed out before, no ANSP capital investment is required in order to have an interconnection via an ATN OSI infrastructure. There's no additional physical deployment required. So we can have an early connectivity through the ATN network and the service available in 2023 already with our operational environment. We have an immediate increase in CBDLC data capacity, which are order of magnitude above the VDL-MO2. So this supports these data-hungry applications we are expecting in the future, for instance, for EPP. And there's a big advantage also with respect to the coverage, with respect to the flight level, down to the flight level 0, if you will. Currently, we have this VDL-MO2 coverage, double coverage from flight level 195 upwards. And with SATCOM, we can clearly go down to flight level 0, supporting a gate-to-gate concept if you want. And with a second data link on board the aircraft, you have a data link service resiliency here based on dual equipped aircraft. We have the aspects of interoperability, as the IRIS equipped additionally supports the FANS protocol, providing seamless solution for the airspace management, especially on the oceanic boundary for the Atlantic traffic. And standardization already pointed out, they are planned to be finalized end of this year. MOPS and MAS were already available. Regarding benefits, we can add also to the major mid and long-term benefits the increased capacity with respect to the new data-hungry applications, as we are currently also investigating in the context of the Wave 3 SESAR project PJ38, where we are collecting EPP data on the ground. We have also a horizontal increase of coverage for the which goes beyond the European landmass and oceanic areas, which are interesting of, for instance, for NATS, which are just on the border of the Atlantic. We have, as we have heard in the presentation from Benoit, support with respect to the migration from ATN OSI to ATN IPS. These are considered in 2 different solutions in the SESAR projects which are run until the end of the year. One is the solution 107, specifically taking a look at the future SATCOM IRIS system. And the solution 77 is the future communication infrastructure with respect to the multi-link implementation based on ATN IPS. Regarding interoperability, it's also a point that it provides improved long-range communication system for use in oceanic and remote airspace. And it is the first data link which also supports security means like an air-ground link authentication. As it has been shown, there's a VPN established between the air and the ground. I made a point regarding potential support of time-critical CBDLC services. One have to be careful what is meant here. We, in the past, had already our concerns with respect to VDL-MO2, to the fact that it has a channel scheme, just listen before talking. That's what is implemented. And this might cause 2 problems when we have a high load on the link. We have retransmissions and the delay performance might really go down. And this is absolutely a no-go for time-critical implementations, time-critical services. This is not the case when we have a SATCOM system with enough bandwidth there available for supporting this services. And of course, we also have an increase in capacity with respect to the AOC. What are the risk or the non-risk then? Just to summarize this one, and I try to make it a little bit colorful. So the non-risks are green and the risks are red. The non-risk already stated minimal technical risks when integrating SATCOM into our environment, because we can simply reuse our existing infrastructure. We do not have to invest any new systems, so no investment cost risk there. So the additional costs are only OPEX costs based on a user pays principle, which we expect from the DSP to be implemented in 2025. This is the Datalink service provider, which run the CAAB just indicated in the slides before. But there are risks, of course. You might recall what I have said about Aeromax, and we might have a similar issue with respect to SATCOM. The airspace users might be cautious in investing SATCOM next generation, and so the rollout of the airborne equipment might be slow. So we have to, as a mitigation mean, focus on the development of airspace use cases for adoption of IRIS, including ATC and also non-ATC benefit cases. And another point is that the support of the integration of SATCOM is not really currently harmonized amongst all ANSPs in Europe. So you might have one ANSP supporting SATCOM, another ANSP not supporting SATCOM. This is not really a very harmonized implementation and should be avoided. This needs strong governance work from this new Datalink service provider. Instead of a direct mandate, as we have in the implementing rule, for the use of this ATS common data link service, this is what is more or less the service provided by the DSP over the CEAP. So in total, it might lead to the situation that the ANSP might not be in a position to take advantage of the SATCOM capability from the time that it is really technically available. This might delay the benefits that can be achieved, including migration from VDL Mode 2 saturation, or mitigation from the VDL Mode 2 saturation. So what is the real risk? And I just make it really very simple. The main risk for me is not to use the actual window of opportunity to use SATCOM as the first available wideband data link. We missed that window of opportunity for Aeromax system. We should not miss it for the SATCOM system, as it really is in place. The technology is already deployed, and a lot of work has been done to validate the service. In order to really make it happen that we can use the service, therefore, we will support the SATCOM development until it is really certified and validated. So DFS and other major ANSPs will further support the SATCOM technology, and you have seen the whole list by Benoit on his slides. So on one side, support in the context of the SESAR projects I mentioned, support of the standardization activities, which are currently ongoing in the ICAO environment, especially. With respect to EuroK, we are currently working on including AT and IPS capabilities of the SATCOM system. We will support also the end-to-end testing of the SATCOM deployments in order to be sure about the functions and the performance of the system. On one side, with respect using the IRIS test facility, so a lab environment. There will be a demo flight upcoming planned for this week, I think the 30th of March, which in the first time will be handled by our operational environment. Before, what you have seen was just our test environment run by engineers, but now it's really in the really operational environment run by our controllers. And we are also supporting the IRIS pre-commercial revenue flights from EasyJet planned from beginning of next year. So we as ANSPs are working, in the direction really to establish required safety and regulatory assurance to support the CBDLC exchanges with respect to the revenue flights from 2023 onwards, leading to an operational usage and adoption of this service. And of course, certification of the avionics and of the service is required from our side. And now, sorry for that, I'm finished with my presentation, and thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Armin, for your very exhaustive and detailed presentation that includes also a lot of interesting points, in my opinion, including the risks identification. It was very, very clear. And for sure, it is very useful to know, especially for SDM, to know the NSPS view about new protocols, technologies, and speaking about SATCOM. So thanks again. Before launching the second pool, you would like to have the complete view from the SATCOM users. So I have the pleasure now to introduce the next presentation. The title is The Airlines Operational Perspective, and it is presented by EasyJet. So let me to introduce Kieran Murphy and Andrew Egan from EasyJet. Kieran is the aircraft connectivity manager at EasyJet, now in 10th year of working at EasyJet. Previously in various roles within, again, EasyJet's engineering part CMO's organization. Now he is responsible for driving EasyJet aircraft connectivity strategy and leading EasyJet participation in IRIS. Andrew is the head of technology, airline operations. With more than 20 years of aviation experience, he is responsible for the management and evolution of the core airline system to produce, plan, and deliver the flying program at EasyJet, including aircraft communication systems. So, Kieran, please share your slides, and then the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr.
Maybe, Kieran, your voice is breaking a bit. Yeah. Maybe if you can.
No problem in hearing you, Kieran.
You may try to.
So I will be taking this to.
The video would help.
You should be good now. So to start with, I just want to give a bit of background about EasyJet and our participation in IRIS. So EasyJet at the moment, on the last count that I was provided with, we're operating 325 aircraft, all A320 series with AOCs in 3 different countries. So we have a UK AOC, a Swiss AOC, and an Austrian AOC. We're currently operating across the vast majority of Europe, out of 154 airports, 35 different countries, and we're just shy now of 1,000 routes. So we're 981 routes at the moment. So as has been mentioned in some of the previous presentations, we've recently confirmed our participation in the IRIS project. So we will be taking part in the large-scale demonstrations, and we're very excited to be the first airline to sign up to doing this. So we're planning on equipping 10 or so of our aircraft with the Cobham Aviator light cockpit SATCOM system. So that will be delivered to us on those 10 aircraft on new deliveries out of the Airbus production line, starting from November this year, and over about the period of about 12 months. We're aiming to perform immediately perform some AOC trials from those aircraft, whilst we're awaiting the certification of the fans over SATCOM from Airbus, which is expected around January, and at which point we'll move straight on to performing ATS trials. So over the within the IRIS project, we will, on all of these aircraft, will be performing commercial revenue flights, and we'll be using the IRIS system and the LCS system for FANCI and CPDLC. So all of these aircraft will also be FANCI equipped, and we previously took part in the large-scale demonstration of FANCI. Of course, this is subject to the necessary approvals, which I'm sure IASA will speak about shortly later on today. So we, on the SATCOM system, over this, we are planning on performing tests and trials of both ATS and AOC applications. We have recently performed a large-scale retrofit of FOMAX across our entire fleet of aircraft. For Airbus operators out there, you're probably aware of what FOMAX is. FOMAX is for those who aren't aware, it's effectively a data acquisition box with integrations to a lot of other aircraft systems. Can be used to interface with your EFB, and it also has a link with the SATCOM system as well. So we're receiving this on all of our new delivery aircraft as well, and we'll plan on assessing some of the optional features that are available via FOMAX that could benefit from having a SATCOM system and the IP connection that a SATCOM system offers. So firstly, from our side, why do we see the need to modernize aircraft communications? So we're going to cast back to 2019 here, pre-COVID. If we look back at that year, EasyJet suffered from approaching 2 million minutes of delays associated to ATC capacity in that year alone. Some other statistics related to that. So that was 18% of all of EasyJet's flights in 2019 suffered from some sort of ATC delay. And 51% of those delays were purely down to capacity issues. So, you know, there's a large-scale operational impact from this. It's a negative passenger experience. We're hopeful. I mean, as we said before, we took part in the FANCI large-scale demonstrations previously, and we hope that SESAR initiatives such as FANCI and I4D should help in reducing those delays, providing us with additional capacity in the ATM communications world, and you know, that should provide us with more efficient routing and CO2 carbon savings. It's quite clear to us at the minute that the current aircraft communication systems just won't have the bandwidth to handle that additional communications traffic that's required for FANCI and I4D. And throw in there the additional AOC data requirements as well. It's quite clear that we're going to need to introduce some sort of new communication system or additional bandwidth enabled for us to meet these future demands. The introduction of new modern communication systems, you know, that provide an IP connection to the aircraft, also provide a lot of opportunities to airlines as well. So there's some new AOC applications that we could see some benefits from here. So we could look to at things such as improving the communications between our crew and our network control center. Real-time weather, increasing predictive maintenance. All of these things are not possible really with our current communication systems, and we hope that to be able to trial some of these things through the IRIS project. The other thing on here as well, security. So you know, in the current day and age, it's very important that we're making sure we're evolving our systems and ensuring that they are able to meet all of the you know, ongoing security risks. I mean, the aircraft communication systems are absolutely critical to airline operations, so we need to make sure that we're providing a secure and robust solution. But it's worth us saying here that this is all good, and yes, there's a need for us to modernize aircraft communications, but it shouldn't be seen as the only thing that needs to be done. It's not going to be the one thing that's going to cure the ATM issues that we're seeing and improve capacity and cater for future growth. Oops, sorry.
I have to go earlier home, so I am listening.
Sorry, I couldn't hear. Is there a comment there or a question? Sorry.
No, please go ahead, Kieran. There was a mic opened. So please
no problem,
continue.
no problem.
Thank you. Sorry.
No problem. So in addition to new communication systems, we need to ensure that member states and ANSPs are working on other ways of providing more efficient airspace structure and working practices to ensure that there's a more sustainable approach to flight planning and ATC. And from our side of things, we really see any change to aircraft communications and any new technology. We really need the ANSPs and regulators to be driving this and making it clear to the airlines what the benefits will be in investing. So now, why SATCOM? So there's lots of talk about SATCOM and LDACs and other technologies. Why particularly SATCOM? Now, the first thing I think we would say about this is that SATCOM is a more established technology compared to some of the other solutions which are being spoken about. So it's long been used for oceanic airlines. I believe Inmarsat mentioned in the previous presentation, it's been used by oceanic airlines for touching on 2 decades. So there's an element of risk that's mitigated from that. The Inmarsat SBS network that IRIS is based upon, it's already deployed globally and certified for Datalink within the NAT region, which, subject to all of the necessary approvals through the IRIS project in Europe, provides the immediate benefit of airlines possibly only having a single system that would allow us to operate within oceanic and continental airspace. I mean, you still require HF for oceanic airspace at the moment, but it's that one single system that enables you to comply with the North Atlantic Datalink mandates, but also to provide you with the benefits within the continental airspace in Europe. In particular, just talking on bandwidth, so this is probably specific to the A320s and the solution offered by Airbus, but the system that EasyJet are going to be receiving here, it's a very small scale antenna, but provides an immediate large scale increase in capacity to the aircraft. So will be the single channel system we're receiving on the aircraft will provide us with up to a 200 kbps bandwidth there. So that's I believe approaching 6 times higher than VDL mode 2 at the moment, and of course it's got the benefit of the global coverage. The other and a really big benefit we see here is that SATCOM, as touched upon in the previous presentation, I believe it can be deployed relatively rapidly by ANSPs. There's not a huge capex investment required by the ANSPs to put this in place. A lot of the integrations are already there with the current communication setup, and large-scale deployment of ground infrastructure across Europe isn't required. In the instance of speaking about LDACs, for instance, the deployment of LDACs would obviously require be a lengthy period of time. With SATCOM, we believe there could be a more immediate benefit. And with it already being global, we could see data coverage in areas which were previously disconnected within our network, which could immediately open up our ability to, if we move over and look at using ACARS over IP, for instance, we've immediately got a more resilient link to the aircraft and a stronger link we can rely on in the entire area of our operation. And going back to my final point I spoke about previously, security as well. Speaking about ACARs over IP in particular as well here. So if we're to do that via SATCOM, it's immediately secured via VPNs and PKI, which is a step change over what we're used to seeing at the moment. So this all sounds great. However, it doesn't come without some challenges, and the first of which, and which airlines are very familiar with, is of course equipping aircraft will be a substantial investment for operators, and in order to justify this substantial investment, airlines will want to see a clear strategy coming from the ANSPs and from the regulators, and know that there will be benefits for them to have before that they invest in this. We need to, looking back at previous rollouts of Datalink, for instance, airlines invested, got the technology fitted onto the aircraft, only for in certain situations it to be lagging behind from the ANSP and regulatory standpoint. So we'll want to be sure that there's going to be benefits before investing in this, be that through better routing, lower charges. There's many things that could be offered. Is there a risk for early adoption? This is another thing which has happened previously, but will airlines invest in SATCOM only to then find in the next 5-10 years further investment is required in other technology? I touch on LDACs again, and this is it's a topic which is clearly gaining some traction, but which airlines will want to be sure that they're not going to invest a load of money into SATCOM only to find they have to do it again in another 5-10 years time. And retrofits. So will a business case be strong enough to retrofit? Typically, a retrofit comes at a higher charge or a higher overall cost than taking the equipment on a new delivery from Airbus or from the manufacturer. We're fortunate enough to get all of our aircraft via that means. Some other operators not so. So will the business case be strong enough for a retrofit? And if it's not, will deployment at scale and therefore the benefits be slow to be seen? Do we require a critical mass of aircraft to be out there and flying with this technology before ANSPs are able to offer the benefits to airlines? And the final one on here is will airlines see increased navigation charges to pay for the additional OPEX costs that may be encountered by the ANSPs? There's a lot of cost pressure on airlines at the moment, especially coming out of COVID-19. Obviously, very sensitive to any increase in charges. So we have to be very careful that we don't make a substantial investment into a new technology only to also then see increased OPEX as well. And I think this is my final point in here. This is the final point of my slides. The key point that we really want to make is that we believe that the deployment of any new technology, SATCOM, anything, it doesn't matter what it is, it needs to be driven by the ANSPs and by the regulators. It needs to be clear to us what the benefits are going to be. We can assess our AOC benefits, but the main case behind this is going to be through ATM. So we need to be presented with a clear picture of what those benefits are going to be. And we'd encourage as many ANSPs as possible to get involved in the IRIS program to assist with this evaluation phase as well. So thank you very much. That's the end of my slides there, and myself and Andy are here to take any questions that you may have. So, thank you again.
Thank you very much, Kieran and Andrew. Again, it was really an interesting presentation, because all information coming from the users for sure are more than welcome. Again, SDM is very interested, and also the other organization, in getting the point of view of the users at the end, of the final users. Thank you also for sharing your figures related to the, let me say, the performance, the use of your communication systems. So the effect of using your communication systems for us, for sure, again, are very interesting, and also for stressing the need for modernization and also the innovation of the communication system, that in the future ATM, they have to support concepts like TBO, for example. I have also mentioned this need in the introduction of this webinar, so you are confirming this need. So thanks again, and I think now it's time for the second poll. I think Philip, you can send it. So, dear colleagues, please fill it. It's about the concern. What is your biggest concern regarding a SATCOM implementation in your organization? So we will give you some seconds in order to fill it. I think these are the results, so the outcome. Interesting to see, of course, the operational cost is one of the more relevant concern. Then we have the lack of commitment to use from ground or air systems.
David, they are not being shown, the results.
No, not yet.
Yes, yes.
I think I see in my screen. You see?
Yeah.
I don't.
I do.
Now, yes, now it's coming. Okay.
I can see it, yes.
Okay. So again, these are the feedbacks received, and then we can see that operational cost is one of the major concern, of course, as expected, for sure, considering also the period that we are living. Then a lack of commitment to use from the ground or outside, for sure, is another one. Unclear role in the future communication infrastructure architecture. Then it seems that the maturity is considered as not a concern. Installation deployment neither, and then no performance added value, for sure. I would like to ask to you, Kieran, Andrew, Armin, if you would like to comment these results, please.
I think looking at it, it sort of seems to echo a lot of what we touched on in our presentation there. Actually, a cost, lack of commitment to use from the ground or air side. That's and where it fits within the future comms infrastructure as well. So a lot of what we were touching on in our presentation, I think that reinforces the need for the benefits case to be really thought through, and for the ANSPs and the regulators to drive the strategy on this and present the airlines with a good with a good business case for installing a new system. Andy, anything else you'd want to add into that, or?
No, that covers it really. I mean, obviously it's why we as an airline are key to go through this trial and go through and prove some of the value.
From my side, I think it really reflects what we have seen on the presentations with respect to the risks. I think the lack of commitment use it in a harmonized manner in Europe. I think this is one of the major risks we have here. What I'm a little bit surprised is that the missing of the actual window, which I really highlighted in my presentation, is the last but one, let's say it this way. But we should really take the opportunity to make use of the service just right now when it's going to be implemented, in order not to miss that window of opportunity, just from my perspective.
Yeah, so thank you very much. Yes, I agree with you in the need to have a sort of common roadmap agreed among the users first, and of course, considering the buy-in of all stakeholders involved, including industries and manufacturers, of course, because for introducing something, it's clear that we need to have this buy-in, and this is a common view that would be reflected in a common roadmap, in a common plan at the end. Thank you very much again for supporting this pool, interesting results. And now I think it's time for approaching the last relevant presentation. It is very, very, very relevant, in my opinion, because it is on safety and certification aspects. It comes from EASA, and the presenter is Ivan Ferenc. Ivan is a senior expert in ATM, IS, and DS at EASA. He started his career in aviation in 1993 as a flight inspection engineer at the Slovak Civil Aviation Authority. Since 2012, he works for EASA, mainly being involved in the certification and oversight of pan-European ATM CNS providers. So please, Ivan, take the screen, share your slides, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Davide.
Welcome.
So in this presentation, which is actually the last presentation of this webinar, I will provide you with a regulatory perspective on IRIS SATCOM. So let me to clarify how this promising service fits into EU regulatory framework. What are the service models complied with regulations? What is required from IRIS service provider to be certified? And finally, I will list some expected benefit of the pan-EU certification by EASA. So when a new service is assessed from regulatory perspective, the first question is whether this is a regulatory it is a regulated activity. The SATCOM IRIS ensure communication between aircrew and the ground participants of the communication exchange. So let's have a look how the communication service is defined in applicable EU regulation. So for that, we can find an answer in Regulation 549 from 2004. And here the communication service is defined as aeronautical fixed and mobile service to enable ground to ground or air to ground and air to air communication for ATC purposes. ATC stands for air traffic control, which somehow limits or specify definition of this communication service. So obviously, controlled pilot data link communication (CPDLC) application belongs to communication services subject to certification. At this slide, you can see an extract from a template of the ATM ANS certificate. This template is directly included in Regulation 2017/373, which means that there is no, let's say, flexibility in modifying this scope of services. So it is already predefined in regulation. And what concerns communication services, we can see the define three categories of the communication services: and aeronautical mobile service, for air-ground communication, aeronautical fixed service for ground-ground communication, and aeronautical mobile satellite service, aeronautical mobile satellite service, AMSS. And here, what is important to understand is that that there is no distinction between whether this service is for voice communication or data communication. So it is not explicitly mentioned in the certificate template. For current service, which is based on VHF air-ground Datalink, it falls under scope of aeronautical mobile service, which is normally the same or the same category of service as provided for voice communication. But for SATCOM, there is a need of different service to be certified, aeronautical mobile satellite service. So what is the situation that ATM ANS service provider certified to provide communication aeronautical mobile service are authorized to provide both voice and data air-ground communication, and provision of IRIS service requires a certification for aeronautical mobile satellite service. And the situation in Europe is that a majority of European ATM ANS providers are certified for CPDLC over VHF air-ground digital link, but majority of them are not certified for CPDLC over SATCOM. From the certification perspective, we can recognize 4 different models of IRIS service provision. Let's imagine 2 parties. One on one side we have ATS provider, or let's say ATM ANS provider providing air traffic services, and other party is IRIS service provider. So first case is that the ATS provider is itself certified for AMSS, and IRIS service providers is contracted to an organization also certified to this service. Second possible case is that ATS provider is itself certified for this type of service, and the IRIS service provider is contracted to an organization not certified for AMSS. Third case is that ATM ANS provider is not certified for this service, but IRIS service provider is certified for this activity. And the last possible case is that ATS provider is not certified for AMSS, and also IRIS service provider is not certified. So from a regulatory perspective, the first case is compliant with the regulation. Also the second case, also this one, when a service is provided by a certified organization, but ATS provider is not certified. And this case when neither ATS provider nor IRIS service providers is certified, if not acceptable. What the case number 2, which means that ATS provider is itself certified for service, and the service is provided to a contracted organization that is not certified, is currently similar to what we apply for VHF Datalink. And for SATCOM IRIS, we consider the model when ATS provider does not need to be certified for AMSS, but IRIS service provider is contracted to an organization certified for aeronautical mobile satellite service. So this is the situation regarding possible combination and acceptable combination of certified and non-certified entities involved in provision of IRIS service. What IRIS service provider need to ensure is the compliance with a set of regulations. Of course, there is a basic regulation. I'm listing regulation which includes some, let's say, material requirements. In this case, this is mainly Annex 8 of this regulation, referring to some interoperability aspects. Then the cornerstone of the certification is Regulation 2017-373, which includes generic organization requirements, also specific requirements for CNS that refer to ICAO Annex 10 Volume 3, and also there are some requirements for ATSEP, which are also applicable for this type of service. Then there is Regulation 376 on occurrence reporting. Of course, also Regulation 29 from 2009, the Datalink regulation, and also we have included into regulatory baseline Regulation 2021-116, particularly regarding Common Project 1 and AF6 functionality. And of course, as a part of the regulatory base, we are also underlying the Eurocard technical specification. You might remember from the initial presentation from Benoit, there was some timeline of certification steps anticipated, and there was a indication of initial certification with limitations. So indeed, initial target is to verify compliance with requirements that would enable performance or execution of IRIS flight trials. So this is an initial target of the certification effort. So finally, let me conclude with some benefits of IRIS service provider certification. So first, IRIS service provider would be a pan-European service provider under EASA oversight, which means that ATS providers do not need to be certified for aeronautic mobile satellite service, which means that they don't need to open their certification file with the national authorities. Also, ATS provider do not need to perform so-called oversight of IRIS service provider, which is normally required when the service is contracted to a non-certified entity. So in that case, this obligation of ATS to perform kind of oversight over this contracted organization, and also it could include oversight of performed by national competent authority of those navigation service provider. Which means that there is also benefit for IRIS service providers, that this IRIS service provider is not exposed to audits from all EU ATMS providers and the national competent authority. And IRIS service providers shall operate in compliance with applicable regulatory requirements, and these requirements are addressing also safety, quality, security, performance, interoperability. So we might have a better assurance of overall performance of the service once it is provided by a certified organization. And with this, I would conclude my short presentation.
Thank you, Ivan. Again, it is another relevant presentation because I think this presentation was the right one for providing the full picture behind the introduction, the deployment of new technology and SATCOM, of course. In this way, we had the user reviews and then the regulator perspective. I think now we have completed the full picture. Thanks again for your presentation. And now I think it is time for the third pool. I would like to ask Philip to share it. It is just one simple question. Your opinion, by when should the IRIS service provider be certified by EASA for the provision of the aeronautical mobile satellite service? Of course, you can choose just one. And it would be interesting to know your opinion on that. I think These are the results. So it seems that the certification date is expected by 2023. Then we have 2022, 2025, and then 2024. So it seems that the ATM community even is waiting for this certification by 2023. They are suggesting you for your
But
work.
in fact, it is kind of well aligned with schedule for the initial certification. So that's of course we rely on performance of organization. So this is their work that need to be done in order to get certificates from us. But according to the schedule which was set for this activity, it is well aligned with expectations of participants of this meeting.
Okay, so thank you very much. Thank you also for sharing these results. I think we can close now this session. And now it's time for entering in the last agenda point, the Q&A session, answering to some of your questions. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time, just 7 minutes before closing this event. And I'm going to share my screen because we have collected some questions from the chat, and then I would like to share with you the questions that you received. I hope you are seeing my screen.
Yes, we are.
Perfect. So these are some questions that we have received during this event. Some of them are already answered directly in the chat, but would be interesting also to open a discussion about some of them. For example, the first one is related on IRIS. Will it be possible to satisfy the European regulation 29 requirements and so to not install any VDMO2? I think you, Ivan, could provide an answer on that.
Yes, as I indicated in the presentation, Regulation 29 from 2009 is in the certification baseline for ISP certifications. So the service that will be provided is expected to be compliant with this regulation. But of course, to use it as a full replacement of VHF Datalink, it requires some actions on ANSP side. Actually, it was few times mentioned that it is a kind of something which need to be somehow by a navigation service provider, because we need two ends for this communication. It of course depends also on a service model and as it was presented from technical side, there will be no, let's say, huge effort from a ANS provider to make it to be able to communicate over this using this service. But of course, the action of ANSP will be needed.
Okay, thank you very much for your answer, Ivan. I don't know if other colleagues would like to complement your answer. If not, we can go ahead with the second one. Will IRIS support all ATM-B2 services? I think this is for Inmarsat. I don't know, Benoit or Sylvie, if you would like to answer.
Yes, I can confirm. This is the case, yeah.
Sure, for sure, all ATM-B2 services, also because ATM-B2 services are not including the time-critical services like ADSB or other very performance services like time-critical. So I fully agree with you. So the answer is clear, is yes. So the third question is related to is there any interface between IRIS and the secure connectivity initiative? Maybe this question would be answered by Isa.
Yes, if I can, I will take it myself. Antonio speaking. Good afternoon to
yes,
everyone.
please, Antonio.
Well, it's an interesting question, but maybe the real point is we don't know yet what will be the contain or the landscape of secure connectivity. For sure, secure connectivity is an infrastructure to support connectivity in Europe and maybe beyond Europe, because probably will be covering all over the globe. But we're not sure if we'll connect with all the use cases, all possible use cases. And IRIS is definitely one of the use cases we are thinking about in secure connectivity, what the European Commission is thinking about in secure connectivity. So I do expect that based on the fact that IRIS is a service that is available now, secure connectivity is in the future, there will be a need of a legacy structure to be developed as part of the evolution of the system architecture of secure connectivity to contain or complement the existing services will be available. So in practice, I do expect that the future will of secure connectivity will have a legacy view vis-a-vis IRIS and other system, ADSB, for example, or other surveillance solutions. There would be many options, but definitely a legacy support would be needed.
Thank you very much, Antonio, for your exhaustive answer. Passing to the next question. How do you see the CBA fulfilled? The continental space is not joining completely the SATCOM service. Ground-based VGF might serve enough, and they will be replaced, backed by, for example, LDACs. I think Inmarsat, Benoit, or Sylvie, you can provide an answer on that.
Yes, I can take this one. The intent is that, well, the IRIS-equipped aircraft will also have VDL Mode 2, and they will be able to use VDL Mode 2 in case the IRIS service is not provided by an ANSP. But I also would like to recall the multi-link scenario that is being worked in SESAR and also in Eurocontrol, or in the FCI business case. The assumption is that in the future, the additional communication infrastructure, such as SATCOM and or LDACs, will be provided with a pan-European coverage, and the airlines can choose between the various technologies depending on their strategy for communication.
Thank you very much for your answer, Sylvie. I don't know if other colleagues would like to complement. Oh, sorry. If not, I would like to suggest to answer to the other questions by email, because we are approaching the end time of this event. We have just arrived at the end of our trip on SATCOM for Aviation webinars. We hope it was interesting for you and useful also for increasing your awareness on new data link protocols and technologies, and of course on SATCOM, and in this case on IRIS system. Personally, I hope that other initiatives like this will follow about other technologies or other DLS topics. But before closing this event, I would like to thank for sure the organizer of this event from ESA, my colleagues from ESA, Eurocontrol, of course, provided also the organization, the technical organization of this event, and the SESAR JU for the, let me say, perfect organization of this series of events. Then I would like to thank the today presenters for their valuable contribution, for sure. And of course, I would like to thank you, all of you, for your attention and support in participating to our pools and for your questions. I would like also to remind you that the presentations and the recordings of this event will be available in the SESAR.ju website in the next days. Thanks again to all of you. I wish you all the best. Take care and goodbye.
Thank you,
Bye
everyone.
bye. Thank
Bye-bye,
you.
everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.